So I went for a walk this morning, not to exercise, just to walk. And somewhere in that walk, a question showed up uninvited. Why is it so hard to just be happy? Not rich, not successful, not admired, just happy, content, at peace. And that question is what this episode is about. Because the answer, once you actually look at it, is going to challenge almost everything modern culture has told you happiness is supposed to look like. So, the paradox. Happiness has a price. The duality principle is my core philosophical claim here. And so, here's the first idea, and it's uncomfortable. Happiness is fleeting, not permanent. Fleeting. And it's supposed to be. Not because life is cruel, not because something is wrong with you, but because happiness, by its very nature, can only exist in contrast to its opposite. You can't know warmth without having felt cold. You can't know light without having sat in darkness. And you cannot feel happiness without having known suffering. This is not pessimism, it's physics. It's the way contrast works in human experience. As Marcus Aurelius said, the obstacle is the way. The ancient Stoics knew this. The Buddhists built an entire spiritual system around it. The concept of dukkha. Dukkha, which roughly translates to the inherent unsatisfactoriness of clinging to anything permanent in an impermanent world. Well, what this means practically is the pursuit of permanent happiness is the exact thing making you miserable because it doesn't exist. It was never supposed to. So what do we do with that? We stop chasing the feeling and start building the conditions where it can visit more often. So how is it that we got here? Well, technology, information overload, and the anxiety epidemic. Now here's where it gets dark and real. Something has changed drastically. And the timeline of that change lines up almost perfectly with the rise of smartphones and social media. We have given ourselves unlimited access to virtually everything, every crisis, every tragedy, every political disaster, every opinion, every injustice on the planet, 24 hours a day in our pocket at all times. And we wonder why we're anxious. There's a term for this: information overload induced anxiety. Research from the American Psychological Association has consistently shown the news consumption, particularly digital news, is directly correlated with elevated stress, anxiety, and helplessness. We were not built for this volume of threat stimuli. Our nervous systems were built for the village, not the planet. But here's the moment that drives this home. I went outside. I put the phone down. I laid on the ground. And in that moment, no notifications, no headlines, no outrage. I felt something rare. Stillness. A quiet exchange of energy with the earth beneath me. Bliss. That wasn't an accident. That was my nervous system finally being allowed to regulate itself the way that it was designed to. Grounded. Literally. Psychologists call this grounding. Researchers call contact with natural environments green therapy or ecotherapy. Studies show measurable reductions in cortisol, the stress hormone, within minutes of nature exposure. Found the antidote just by taking a walk and having a realization. And then you have the architecture of meaning. What we traded away. Well, we traded away community, family, purpose, and the birth rate crises. Here's the deeper wound underneath the anxiety. We have slowly, systematically dismantled the very structures that gave human life meaning for thousands of years and replaced them with content, consumption, and performance. Meaningless content. Now, there are many forms of good content, but it's only good if you apply what you learned. And if you're cleaning your house and listening to a podcast, you're not going to retain the lesson that you may be watching the podcast to learn. This is proven. And so, unless you're sitting there with intent to take something away from whatever podcast it is that you're watching or listening to, then and you don't apply that to your life, then nothing is changing. You're watching and consuming meaningless, pointless content at that point. It's meaningless to you because it's not helping you. You're not applying it because you're not even hearing it. You're not present. Then we have community. We traded the neighborhood, the church, the town square, and the front porch for a screen that shows us a curated performance of everyone else's highlight reel. Robert Putnam documented this collapse in his landmark book, Bowling Alone, in 2000, showing that American civic and social life has been in free fall for decades. Then there's relationships and family. Social media and dating apps have turned human connection into a marketplace. And in any marketplace, there is a top tier and a bottom tier. And the data, while debated and its exact numbers, does reflect a real pattern. A concentration of romantic attention toward a small percentage of men, while the majority, men who want to build, commit, and grow, are effectively invisible. This is not a moral failure of individuals. It is a structural problem created by infinite choice and algorithm-driven dopamine loops. I think I heard, and I don't know if these numbers are exactly right, but I heard that it's like 95% of the women want the top 5% of men. So they want somebody who's got it all already, rather than building with someone, building connection, building a family, working together. This isn't about blaming women or men. It's about recognizing that a platform designed to maximize engagement is, by design, the worst possible environment for finding authentic human connection. It was never built for that. And then you have the birth rate. This is the canary in the coal mine, and it's already dead. The U.S. birth rate is at a historic low. So is Japan's. So is most of Europe's. And the downstream consequences of a society that stops reproducing are not just demographic, folks. They are deeply psychological, and studies suggest that childlessness, particularly when chosen in the context of cultural messaging rather than genuine desire, is linked to elevated rates of long-term depression, regret, and reduced sense of purpose in later life. So, women have a very short window of opportunity to birth a child before they hit menopause. And more women are letting that window slip away, it would seem. And then they end up in regret and depressed after menopause when they didn't have any kids. They didn't fulfill their biological purpose. And I would argue that the same goes for men. But parenthood is not just biology. It's one of the most powerful purpose anchors in human experience. And a culture that has made parenthood logistically, financially, and socially overwhelming, or worse, optional as a preference, has served one of the oldest tethers to meaning that humans have ever had. And it's really sad. It's truly sad. And so then there's the subtraction thesis, less as the path. So, what is the solution to all of this? It's not more, it never was. And so I think the whole premise of modern consumer culture is addition. More money, more status, more followers, more stuff, more options. And there's a psychological phenomenon that explains exactly why this never works. It's called hedonic adaptation. Studies show that humans return to a relatively stable baseline of happiness regardless of what they gain or lose. The raise, the new car, the apartment upgrade, within weeks, sometimes days. It's just background noise. The Stoics called this the problem of false goods, things that feel like they'll bring happiness, but don't actually move the needle on your inner state. So, here's the counter move, the one that actually works. Not addition, but subtraction. Less. Less technology. Less noise. Less clutter. Less indoor time. Less distraction. When you remove everything from the table except one thing, say a book, or a walk, a physical conversation, the ground beneath you, you are forced into its presence. And presence is where happiness lives. Not in the future you're planning or the past you're analyzing, but right here, right now. This is not a new idea, by the way. The Epicureans built an entire school of philosophy around simple pleasures. The Japanese concept of ma, the intentional creation of empty space, is central to their aesthetic and psychological philosophy. Minimalism isn't a trend, it's a recovery of something ancient. The less is more principle. Quality of experience expands in inverse proportion to the quantity of stimulation. And so then there's the framework, building conditions for happiness. Practical philosophy, not toxic positivity. Let's be clear about what this episode is not saying. I'm not saying just be grateful or think positive or any of that shallow motivational content that insults your intelligence. Suffering is real. Systemic problems are real. The world is genuinely difficult right now. And anyone who tells you otherwise is selling something. Full stop. Now, what this is saying is this. You cannot control whether happiness visits you, but you can build a life that makes it more likely to show up and stay longer when it does. And the conditions worth building are presence over consumption, daily practice of stillness, walk, ground, sit, no phone, no computer, no TV, no radio, no nothing but silence and presence. And then there's connection over performance, real relationships, however few, over a wide audience of strangers who don't know your name. You need those real relationships. And then purpose through contribution, whether that's parenthood, mentorship, journalism, service, something beyond your own comfort. And then there's subtraction as discipline, regularly moving, not adding, and audit your inputs ruthlessly. And then there's acceptance of impermanence. You have to accept the fact that happiness will leave. And by accepting that fact, you are also accepting the fact that suffering will also leave. Neither is the final word. So, I have an invitation, raw, personal, and direct. I don't have this figured out. I still get frustrated. I still let things hit a nerve. I still find myself reading something and feeling my blood pressure rise. But I'm also the guy who laid down on the ground after a walk today and felt, for a few minutes, completely at peace with the world. And in that moment, no followers, no algorithm, no news cycle, no political argument, just me and the earth and the sky. I was chasing nothing. And that exact moment might be the closest thing to happiness I know how to describe. Maybe that's enough. Maybe that's the whole point. Just sit with that, folks. Just sit with that. This has been The Manufactured Mind, folks. And I'm your host, Robey. Think deeper. Be present. Peace out.